Have you ever considered how, in just a matter of minutes, an ordinary day can descend into a nightmare? Picture this. You're on a tropical island, surrounded by lush greenery. The sun warms your skin, and the rhythmic sound of waves promises peace and tranquility. But what if, lurking behind every serene corner, there's a shadow waiting for its moment to emerge? On April 7th, 2019, Miriam, a young tourist from Germany, set out for a walk to a temple on Koh Chang Island. It was supposed to be a peaceful day, just another highlight of her vacation. By evening, however, she hadn't returned. Security cameras captured her smiling and carefree as she began her hike, unaware that in just a few hours, her smile would vanish forever. Koh Chang, renowned for its serene, laid-back vibe, is a place where disturbances are rare. The island exudes slow-paced natural beauty, with turquoise waters, white sandy beaches, and dense green jungles that have held their secrets for centuries. Into this secluded paradise came Miriam in the spring of 2019, combining a business trip with a long-anticipated vacation. But her journey took a dark and unexpected turn, unraveling into a chilling mystery that still raises more questions than answers. Initially, there was nothing unusual about Miriam's trip. She was ambitious and successful, having graduated from the University of Hanover and quickly advancing in her career as a design engineer for a prominent company. Her work often required long hours and frequent travel, but this trip felt different. After completing her business commitments, she decided to stay a few extra days on the remote island of Koh Chang, finally fulfilling her dream of experiencing its pristine white sands and crystal-clear waters. Everything changed when Miriam failed to show up for breakfast on the day she was set to leave. Concerned, the hotel staff tried contacting her, but her phone was unreachable. Hours passed before her disappearance was officially reported to local authorities, though the seriousness of the situation had yet to sink in. According to official records, Miriam had come to Thailand for business, where her meeting with suppliers had gone smoothly. Her colleagues noted that she often extended work trips for some personal downtime, even if it meant traveling solo in a foreign country. This time, it was her curiosity and love for exploration that encouraged her to linger on the island after her team returned home. Miriam was known for her adventurous spirit, but friends emphasized that she was careful and rarely took unnecessary risks. While she enjoyed discovering new places, she wasn't the type to seek out spontaneous connections or engage in risky activities. Yet locals recalled that she had shown a particular interest in Koh Chang's less-traveled areas. Tour guides noted her inquiries about hidden beaches and secluded coves, places where one could feel utterly removed from the world. Miriam's story, which began with dreams of relaxation and exploration, soon turned into a haunting reminder of how unpredictable life can be, even in the most idyllic of settings. This curiosity was somewhat out of character for Miriam, who was typically known for her preference for structured plans and carefully thought-out details. A seasoned traveler, her itinerary for this trip had been meticulously arranged. After concluding her business meetings in Bangkok, she scheduled a brief visit to Pattaya before heading to Koh Chang. Like many tourists, she intended to enjoy the beaches and natural beauty, but Miriam's approach was different. She sought out places off the beaten path, hidden spots where she could immerse herself in nature and solitude. Her journey to Koh Chang began with an early morning ferry ride that brought her to the island. Staying true to her organized nature, she rented a motorbike immediately upon arrival and set off on her carefully planned route. One of her destinations was a centuries-old stone temple perched on a hill, accessible only to those willing to make a determined climb. Known among locals as a secluded spot for quiet reflection, the temple was hidden within a dense jungle. The day started uneventfully. As she approached the temple, the morning was peaceful and serene, with all the familiar markers of island tranquility. Miriam parked her rented motorbike at the base of the hill, near a small flower stall. The vendor, busy arranging fresh jasmine and calendula bouquets, greeted her warmly. Miriam purchased a few flowers, exchanged pleasantries, and then began her ascent up the temple's steep stone steps. Surveillance cameras recorded her steady climb, a bottle of water in one hand and a small backpack on her shoulders. She wore a light smile, as though anticipating a meaningful and beautiful experience. Hours passed, but Miriam didn't return. By evening, her motorbike remained parked beside the now closed flower stall, a silent, unsettling witness to her absence. The flower vendor was the first to notice something was wrong. The motorbike, untouched since morning, stood alone, and Miriam had not been seen coming back down the steps. Concerned, the vendor alerted the authorities the next day. What began as a routine missing person case quickly escalated into something far more disturbing. As investigators retraced her steps, they discovered that Miriam had not intended to stay on the island long. Her plan was for a single-day visit, a short excursion, a few photos, lunch, and a return to the mainland. Organized and cautious, she adhered to her own rules, avoiding strangers, safeguarding her valuables, and regularly checking in with family. Her abrupt silence was the first alarming sign for her loved ones. By noon, on April 7th, she had stopped responding to messages, and by evening, it was as though she had vanished without a trace. The temple Miriam was headed to is far from a typical tourist destination. It isn't featured in travel brochures, and even locals rarely visit. Encircled by thick jungle, the path leading there is long and arduous. The damp, moss-covered stone steps make the climb even more challenging. Security footage revealed that she had been hiking alone, with no one else visible in the area at the time. Police reviewed the surveillance footage repeatedly, searching for clues. The video showed Miriam's calm and steady ascent toward the temple, her expression serene with a faint smile. But beyond that brief moment, captured on camera, time seemed to stand still, offering no answers to the mystery of her disappearance. The last confirmed sighting of Miriam on the island came from a surveillance camera. As police interviewed locals, a potential lead emerged. A few days before her disappearance, Miriam had been spotted at a cafe near the pier, chatting with an unidentified man. His identity couldn't be confirmed, but their interaction suggested they were familiar enough to sit together over coffee. Perhaps they had met on the ferry or at her hotel, but no one reported seeing them together after that encounter. This raised a series of haunting questions. What happened on her way to the temple? Why didn't she return? And who was the man she had spoken with? On the morning of April 8th, 2019, Ko Chang Island awoke to a chilling discovery. A Thai tourist, out for an early morning hike to the temple to enjoy the cool jungle air, stumbled upon a horrifying scene. As he climbed the steep, stone-covered trail, he noticed something unusual near a small ravine off the path. Amid the dense foliage, a pale shape caught his eye, something that didn't belong in the lush green surroundings. Drawing closer, he realized it was the body of a young woman wedged between two large rocks. Her body had been partially covered with branches and leaves, as if someone had tried to hide it. There were visible signs of trauma, including bloodstains nearby. Shaken, the hiker immediately contacted local emergency services. Within an hour, officers arrived at the scene. and news of the discovery spread rapidly across the island. While Ko Chang's police were grappling with the grim find, panic was mounting back in Germany among Miriam Bielti's family and friends. She had stopped responding to messages on the evening of April 7th, which was highly unusual for her. Known for her responsible and cautious nature, Miriam always stayed in touch while traveling, especially when alone in a foreign country. Her parents, accustomed to her regular updates, grew increasingly anxious. By the morning of April 8th, after realizing they had heard nothing from her, they filed a missing person report. Investigators on Ko Chang began piecing together the troubling details. The body found in the ravine was soon identified as Miriam Bielti, a 20-year-old German tourist. Hotel staff confirmed that she had planned to leave the island on the evening of April 7th, yet her rented motorbike was still parked at the base of the hill, right where she had left it, before heading toward the temple. Initially, authorities considered the possibility that Miriam had suffered a tragic accident, a slip or fall on the slick, moss-covered trail. However, this theory was quickly ruled out. Her injuries were too severe and inconsistent with a simple fall. Her face and head bore clear signs of bruises and cuts, and evidence of physical aggression suggested that her death was both intentional and violent. Even more distressing, investigators found evidence indicating that Miriam had been assaulted before her death, casting an even darker shadow over the case. The investigation intensified as police reviewed surveillance footage from cameras placed along the trail and in the parking area, hoping to uncover more clues about the events leading up to her tragic death. At the base of the hill, surveillance footage showed Miriam calmly climbing the stone steps, carrying a bottle of water and a small backpack. She appeared composed and walked with purpose. However, one troubling detail captured investigators' attention. Minutes after Miriam disappeared around a bend, another figure appeared on camera. A man dressed in dark clothing followed her at a distance. When he returned later, his clothes were visibly dirty and damp, with light-colored stains. Further investigation began to shed light on the day's events. The flower stall vendor at the trail's base remembered seeing the man. He had arrived on a motorbike, purchased a bouquet of marigolds, and followed Miriam up the trail. At the time, nothing seemed unusual. However, the vendor recalled the man's strange behavior upon his return. He appeared nervous, glanced around repeatedly, and when questioned, claimed he had merely slipped. Finding this suspicious, the vendor wrote down the motorbike's license plate, sensing it might be important. As the investigation progressed and Miriam's body was discovered, this unknown man became the prime suspect. Surveillance footage, the vendor's description, and the recorded license plate quickly led authorities to identify the motorbike's owner, Ronicorn Romruan, a 24-year-old local resident. Ronicorn worked as a beach cleaner and lived alone in a dilapidated house on the island's outskirts. When police went to his home, Ronicorn was nowhere to be found. Officers initiated a search, hoping to uncover clues about his possible involvement. During this process, unsettling aspects of his life came to light. Although locals described him as a reclusive and eccentric figure, few were aware of his darker side. Neighbors noted his withdrawn and unwelcoming demeanor, adding that he rarely interacted with others. Those who knew him better, however, had witnessed flashes of erratic aggression and anxious behavior. Some claimed to have seen him aimlessly wandering the island, as though searching for someone or something. But who was this man who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere to shatter a young tourist's dream vacation? What drove him to follow Miriam that day? In the early hours of April 7th, 2019, Ko Chang was still quiet and serene as Ronicorn awoke in his small, cluttered home on the edge of the island. Sleep had offered little reprieve from his troubled thoughts, which remained clouded by the influence of illegal substances. His home reeked of cheap alcohol, with empty bottles strewn across the table. Seeking an escape from his chaotic mind, he turned to his usual coping mechanisms, a few beers and shots of stronger alcohol, to dull his thoughts, even temporarily. But on that particular morning, his routine wasn't enough. Restless and agitated, Ronicorn consumed an additional dose of a different substance. The effect was immediate, pushing him into a disoriented and altered state. His thoughts grew erratic and fragmented, devoid of coherence, as he searched for something to fill the growing void within him. This spiral of intoxication and instability set the stage for the events that would follow, culminating in a tragedy that shattered the peace of the island. Ronicorn, filled with agitation and a desperate need for an outlet, decided to ride his motorbike aimlessly to escape his chaotic thoughts. As he traveled along the road, he found himself at the base of a hill, where a trail led up to a temple. It was here that he first noticed her, a young European tourist, dressed neatly and walking with a relaxed, carefree pace, unaware of the eyes watching her. The sight of her calm demeanor snapped Ronicorn out of his foggy state, and unable to resist his clouded urges, he decided to follow her. Stopping at a nearby stall, he bought a bouquet of marigolds, hoping the gesture would make him seem friendly and give him an opportunity to approach. The vendor noticed Ronicorn's strange behavior, his eyes vacant, yet unnervingly intense, which unsettled him. But Ronicorn didn't linger, soon setting off up the trail after Miriam, disappearing around a bend. Meanwhile, Miriam, unaware of the man following her, continued her climb, enjoying the peaceful morning and the beauty of the trail. For her, it was simply another day of relaxation during her long-awaited vacation, a brief break after her hard work. A seasoned traveler, Miriam knew how to stay safe, but even her caution couldn't have prepared her for what was to come. Surveillance footage showed Ronicorn catching up to her, holding the flowers. At first, he tried to strike up a conversation, pretending to be friendly. Miriam, though polite, was cautious, and the gesture of offering flowers seemed more perplexing than welcoming. She thanked him and continued on, but Ronicorn kept following. What happened next wasn't caught on camera, but witness statements and Ronicorn's confession later revealed the truth. Under the influence of alcohol and substances, he could no longer control his impulses. He bluntly suggested she join him in a secluded spot, but Miriam immediately refused, fear creeping into her voice. She quickened her pace, but Ronicorn continued to follow, eventually running after her. In a surge of anger and frustration, a fury toward her and his own life consumed him. In his altered state, reason was lost. He caught up with her, grabbed her arm, and forcefully pulled her toward him. Miriam screamed and fought to break free, but the area was isolated, with no one around to hear. He dragged her into the thick vegetation off the path, where her struggle grew more intense, but ultimately futile. What began as a confrontation on the trail ended in the shadows of the trees, where her cries were silenced. When the police arrived at the scene hours later, they quickly realized this was no random assault. Miriam's body showed clear signs of aggression, and the disturbed earth indicated a violent struggle. Ronicorn likely retraced his steps alone after the incident, as the flower stall vendor saw him pass by again. His clothes were damp and stained, and when asked if everything was okay, Ronicorn nervously claimed he had slipped. This odd response raised the vendor's suspicions, and the license plate he had noted became crucial in solving the case. That evening, Ronicorn returned home, washed his clothes, but the stains remained. He then lay on his couch, turning on the TV as if nothing had happened. Perhaps Ronicorn believed that by returning to normalcy, he could leave everything behind, but that wasn't the case. When the police came to his door, he made no attempt to flee, almost as if he had been waiting for this moment, knowing the end had arrived. Although he tried to stay composed during his arrest, it quickly became clear that his calm demeanor was simply a mask, hiding his confusion and fear. His eventual confession during questioning shocked no one, but the cruelty he revealed was far worse than anyone had expected in such a tranquil place. During the interrogation, Ronicorn initially tried to mislead investigators, but his story soon fell apart, and he began to recount the events in full detail. His confession was disturbing, and like a nightmare playing out against the idyllic island backdrop. However, the case didn't end with the confession alone. Authorities needed to understand exactly what happened and decided to conduct a reenactment. Ronicorn was brought back to the scene, his head covered to avoid attention. Step by step, he demonstrated his actions, retracing his path and showing every move he made. The officers watched him closely, looking for any details he might have left out. The reenactment was chilling, as Ronicorn replayed his horrifying actions, and when it concluded, investigators had a clear picture of what transpired on that fateful day. As Ronicorn's trial began, it became a critical moment for the Thai justice system. The crime against Miriam had shocked not only the local community, but also people around the world. The incident raised serious questions about the safety of foreign visitors to islands like Koh Chang, and the authorities needed to show that justice would be served. The trial drew attention from both local and international media, with journalists documenting every detail. Throughout the proceedings, surveillance footage, the flower vendor's testimony, and Ronicorn's confession provided undeniable evidence of his guilt. These pieces revealed how he followed Miriam, attempted to talk to her, and then led her to a secluded area where he committed the crime. Despite the confession, the courtroom atmosphere remained tense. The brutality of his actions disturbed even the most experienced reporters. However, the real drama unfolded outside the courtroom. The only person who seemed to try and understand Ronicorn's actions was his mother, whose unexpected appearance in court stirred mixed reactions. She didn't defend her son, but instead tried to understand how something like this could happen, apologizing to Miriam's family and the community. She shared that she and Ronicorn had been estranged for years and that she was unaware of his struggles with controlled substances. While her words were an attempt to find an explanation, they did not excuse his actions. In the end, she begged the court to impose the harshest punishment, acknowledging that her son had lost control of his life and was a danger to others. Ronicorn showed no remorse. He didn't apologize or explain his actions, simply recounting the events with a chilling detachment, as though telling someone else's story. The trial moved swiftly, and just 3 months after the tragedy, a verdict was delivered. Ronicorn was sentenced to death, with attempts by his attorneys to seek leniency failing. The severity of the crime, the disturbing details, and public outcry left no room for mercy. One of the most emotional moments of the trial came when his mother spoke. Her tears and despair, the realization that she had lost her son, both physically and morally, left a lasting impact on everyone in the courtroom. She admitted her fear that, if he were ever released, he could repeat the crime. The final farewell, watching her son led into custody, was heart-wrenching. She knew that her son had lost his humanity, and this realization was the heaviest blow of all. After the verdict, the island of Ko Chang struggled to recover. Once known for its tranquility and natural beauty, it was now scarred by a horrific tragedy that reverberated across the nation. The local community, proud of their culture and hospitality, felt deeply hurt by the incident as it damaged the reputation of their beloved island. They hoped this would remain an isolated event, not a stain on their home. The community came together to support Miriam's family, leaving flowers and candles at the spot where her body had been found, a silent gesture of respect and mourning. It also symbolized their commitment to rejecting cruelty and ensuring such horrors would never happen again. But the tragedy exposed deeper issues. It highlighted problems many preferred to avoid discussing: tourist safety, the darker side of island life, and how easy access to controlled substances could lead to such outcomes. Authorities acted quickly to assure tourists and residents that the islands were still safe, but not everyone was convinced. Following the trial, police reaffirmed that incidents like this wouldn't happen again and that Ko Chang remained a secure destination. But could people truly forget that such a terrible act had once occurred here? The story of Miriam Belte will forever be one of the most tragic and unforgettable incidents in Ko Chang's history. In her memory, Hanover University established a scholarship for young engineers, ensuring her passion for learning would live on. Yet, the pain of her loss continues to affect her loved ones, and those who knew her will never forget her. So, as you plan your next journey, consider this. What can truly guarantee that such a tragedy won't happen again? How can we be sure our next trip won't turn into a nightmare when even a paradise can hide its dark side? Think about this when you travel, for behind the beauty of any place, there may be things best left unknown.